We're continuing on. We're in week 6 of a series that we creatively titled The Book of James because we've been breaking down the book of James. And so we're in week 6 of that. And the book of James was written by James, the brother of Jesus. And he went on later to be a pastor in Jerusalem. And this book is so practical. It's found in the New Testament. And it's a book that for us, if we go, man, God, what does you want to say to me? This is a book that he's going to speak to you. Right? This is a book where you're going to go, whoa, this is really transforming my life from the inside out because of all the practical wisdom that's in it. We looked at how we can tame the tongue, right? It's like, oh, it's untamable, yet through God, here's how we're going to work that. So we know it can be when we're under God's strength. We learned last week the difference between heavenly wisdom and earthly wisdom, right? Because it's such a practical book. I'm just curious, by show of hands, maybe you could clap if you choose to. How many of you have been enjoying this series on the book of James? Come on, it's been good, right? And so this morning, we're going to be in James chapter 4. We're going to be talking about the will of God. And when I say that statement, maybe you think, like, what does that mean, Pastor Lance? Explain to me. When you say, hey, are you living? Are you in your calling? Are you in the perfect, pleasing, holy will of God? That means you're answering the question, why am I here? Right? Why am I here? Why do I exist? Does my life have meaning? Does my life have purpose? And of course, the answer is yes. I know that the specific will of God for my life is to be a pastor. Now, I know even the more detailed is to be right here in the city of Wadsworth at Radiant Life Church. Because he's called me to pastor a church. He's called me to also pastor a community, a city. I want to love the city in which I serve. How many know what I'm talking about? Like, I don't want to go there. Why? Because I don't want to be in that city. No, I love the city of Wadsworth. I love the people of Wadsworth. And I love pastoring one of the great churches in the city of Wadsworth. But here's the struggle sometimes, is people ask me all the time, hey, what do you do for a living? It's in that moment where one of two things is probably going to happen. I wish there was something else I could say. I wish there was a code. Like, how many know I don't want to lie to people? Like, I'm an attorney, right? No. But maybe I could say, like, I don't know, I'm a hope dealer. What am I supposed to say in those moments? Like, I'm just an intervention specialist. When your life's falling out of line, I just help bring it and correct it and shape it. Like, I don't know. But here's what happens is when I say, oh, I'm a pastor, one of two things happens. The first is this. They're like, that's awesome. That's really cool. I went to church, or I go to church. I used to go to church. But it's usually followed up by this. Hey, can I ask you a question? And I love questions. Don't get me wrong. But sometimes they get a little crazy. Like, can I just ask you, oh, you're a pastor, great. Oh, yeah, I love God, I love church. Hey, can I ask you a question? Do you pastor one of those churches? Do you go to one of those churches where they like to sing that loud music? No, actually, I don't think it's loud music. I think it's probably just sensitive ears. And so when you come to Radiant Life Church, we offer earplugs for you because it's not the music, it's your ears. No, I don't say that. But you know what I mean? So there's a question. Or when they find out they're either excited, they have questions, or it's the opposite, which means they don't want to have conversation with you. They tune you out because they have some type of past wound, past hurt, like by a church. And they'll let it know, like, yeah, I used to go to church, but, right? There's always a but. And you're like, oh, man, you could see the pain. It's in that moment where my heart breaks a little bit because I want to have conversation, but they kind of tune you out. Like the other day, I was getting my hair cut, and when you get your hair cut, you want to have conversation, right? And lady's having a conversation with me, and she's like, oh, you from Wadsworth? I was like, I love Wadsworth. It's a great city. How long you been here? I was like, oh, man, I've been in Wadsworth for 10 years. Hey, what brought you to Wadsworth? Oh, man, I get to pastor this great church called Radiant Life Church right around the corner, Hartman Road. Crickets. It's like, oh, man. Like, did I offend you? And so it was real quiet. And then I noticed she's going real fast. And I was like, oh, this is where this is going. And then she started talking about her kids. And I was like, oh, man, I have 3 teenage daughters I love. And then I was talking about, oh, how great our kids ministry was at the church. Dead silence, right? I was like, oh, I offended this lady because I told her I was a pastor. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. I needed to come up. Again, so help me out. If you have a creative title that I could give to people when they ask me what I do for a living, send it my way because I'd love to be able to say what I do for a living without people turning me off. No, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Because that's the moment where I want to talk. Not because I'm trying to persuade anybody. Because I'm not called to persuade people. I'm called to love people. Right? I don't need to tell them they're wrong. I just need to be able to say, tell me about your story. Tell me about your life. And because I truly want to hear it. So this morning, every single one of you has a purpose. Every single one of you has a very specific call or the will of God for your life. And this morning, I want to look at the will of God in 2 different perspectives. The first is a life-defining will of God. That a life-defining will of God is what will you be known for at your funeral? what will people speak about you? Right? When you think about Esther, right? You read in the Old Testament, in the book of Esther, and you hear about this queen, and she's in this position for such a time as this. What did she do? She saved an entire nation. Right? That's what people speak about when they think of Esther. When you think of Abraham Lincoln, you think about how he preserved an entire nation. So when people say, hey, what's the life-defining will of God for my life? It's that thing that I'm supposed to do. Right, this week I had a privilege to be, this past week I flew out on Monday to a city that I had never heard of before in Wyoming called Jackson Hole. Right, I'd never heard of it. It's a big ski town. I don't ski, so that's probably why I never heard of it. And it's the #1 wealthiest city in America, so probably the #2 reason I've never heard of it. Half an acre of land cost you $500,000. Right, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, $2 million. That's why I've never heard of Jackson Hole, because I don't run in circles with billionaires, okay? Because if there's a billionaire watching, just know Radiant Life Church, you can give online if you want, okay? But here's the deal. As I fly into this city, and I was there with 12 other amazing leaders. It was a time for us to just find rest and to retreat, and it was phenomenal. I had a chance to go up, and I had whitewater rafting. So if you've ever heard my story about whitewater rafting, I lived, so now I have a redemption story because I almost died twice whitewater rafting. This time it was enjoyable. But I had a chance to hike in the Grand Tetons and to be able to go up in those mountains. There's something that I learned on that trip, and that is I should lay off the hamburgers. Jackson Hole, the elevation is 6,400 feet when you're there, and then we climbed another 1,000 feet. So it was like I was 7,400 feet above sea level, and I realized that I needed to exercise more because I couldn't catch my breath. I was like, oh, this is painful. But I made it, right? I got all the way to the top, got some sweet pictures. But while I was there with these amazing leaders, we went around the room at dinner time, and they just said, hey, give me your Jesus story in 3 minutes. How many know you have a story? And he said, give me your Jesus story. How'd you come to faith? Tell me about what Jesus means. You got 3 minutes. And what was unique is as we began going around the room, you would hear some powerful stories, some powerful testimonies, but you would hear individuals who played a key role in that. Like, oh, my Sunday school teacher when I was 7. They just spoke into my life. They poured into my life. And I felt like in that moment, I felt like I was called into ministry. And then they just kept pouring into me and speaking into me. We had pastors, successful churches of 1,000, 2,000 people. And they were like, man, a youth pastor. When I was a no-good-for-nothing teenager. Not you guys on the front row because I love you. Right? But I was a no-good-for-nothing teenager. And this youth pastor just loved on me. And he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And he called it out of me. And now he's pastoring a church of like 2,000 people. And the reason I'm sharing that with you this morning is when you think about the life-defining will of God, never diminish the influence you can have in somebody else's life. Right? That specific call, whether it's in kids ministry, youth ministry, adult ministry, whatever that would be, wherever he's called you in your marketplace ministry, where you're employed, never, never, never diminish the influence you can have in somebody else's life. Someone believed in them, and someone can believe in you. My question to you is, who do you believe in? Right? I'm challenging you. Who do you believe in? What do you see in somebody else that they don't see in themselves, that God's calling you to speak it, like pull it out of them because they don't see what a great leader they're going to be. Or what a great kids pastor they're going to be. What a great fill in the blank engineer they're going to be. And so God's waiting for you to be able to say, hey man, I see something in your life. I see a great calling. What? Because you have a life-defining will of God. Then you have what's called the life-encompassing will of God. This, I think about Acts chapter 17, verse 26. It begins asking questions like, why were you born? Why were you born the day you were born? How come you weren't born in the 1700s or the 1800s or the 1900s? Gosh, I'm old. How come you were born now? Why do you live in the city you live in? Why do you have the job you live in right now? Why are you here this morning? All of you had a choice, but obviously when it comes to the life-encompassing will of God, God wanted you here. God wanted you here right now in this moment to hear this message, for you to be able to go, God, what are you trying to say to me? And so there's this life-encompassing will where we say, hey, what's my everyday will? God, what is it you want me to do? How am I to live for you? Billy Graham said it this way: the will of God will not take us where the grace of God cannot sustain us. Right? The will of God's not going to take you somewhere where the grace of God cannot sustain you. And so what do we see in the book of James chapter 4? It's broken down into 3 segments when it comes to the will of God. Now, this is the will of God when it's for all of us. Not that specific, but God, what is your will for my life? How do I live every day? We're going to talk about 3 different segments this morning. If you like taking notes, here's the first. God's will is that you acknowledge that you need help. God's everyday will for you is that you would acknowledge you can't do it by yourself. Right? You can't save yourself. You need God. You need Jesus. There's a lot of things in this life that you need Jesus for. Let's look at the book of James, chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. It says, what is causing the quarrels and fights among you? All right, so you see a little bit of tension. It says, don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? You want what you don't have, so you scheme and kill to get it. You are jealous of what others have, but you can't get it. So you fight, you wage war, and you take away from them. Yet you don't have what you want because you don't ask God for it. For just a moment, realize that this is talking about Christians. It's talking about you and me. Not this church, but another church, right? This moment where they're fighting, they're bickering, they're quarreling, they're literally doing whatever they have to do, and they're killing people. Now, that's not here, but I've heard of some really bad church stories. How many of you have a bad church story to tell? Like you're like, oh, that was bad. That was a horrible experience, right? I've heard of pastors that have to call the police and have them at their annual business meeting because people get out of control. And I'm not talking like, oh, it's such a good meeting. The local police officers and the fire department, they're here to celebrate with us. No, it's, I got to make sure, things stay calm. Right? I've heard of a church where the pastor was up preaching, and in the middle of his message, somebody in like the second row stood up and said, that's enough. I've had enough. You need to quit. Now, don't think about it. I see the second row. It's a bad idea. Not today. Not today. You may feel inclined to, but, right? But for real, and he stood the whole time and said, until you quit, I'm not leaving. They had to call the police, and they escorted him out of the building. That's in a church service. How awkward would it have been for you to be a guest at that service? Like, it's your first time, like, is this what church is really like? You're like, I've never been back since. Well, that doesn't happen here, okay? But I was in a church service. There was something that took place, and the pastor actually resigned, and they thought that we made the pastor resign, but we didn't make the pastor resign. And this lady comes up after me, and she's walking right at me, and she's making a beeline. And it's in that moment where you try not to make eye contact, but you just happen to make eye contact. And she's like, I just want you to know that you're doing Satan's work today. Oh, okay. And she goes, the blood of this church is on your hands. Now, it's in that moment, remember I said that we need to acknowledge that we need God's help. That's the moment where I realized I needed God's help because I had a choice to make, right? 1-800, I'm going to choke that woman, or I'm going to realize that I'm a man of God, I've been called by God, that the Spirit of God is within me, and He's going to help me to be nice. And all I said is, ma'am, I'm so sorry you feel that way. She kept walking. I kept walking. So I didn't put lighter fluid on it and say, oh, you want a piece of me? I didn't do that. And so you see, but again, that's not this church, right? After church, when I say amen, it's not like there's going to be people outside throwing hands. At least I hope not. Some of you, never mind. But here's the deal: that's not going to happen. But isn't that the exact opposite of what church should be? There's this quarreling and there's this fighting. There's this bickering. Aren't we called to love God, to love our neighbor as ourselves? So we need to be a church that loves, and we need to be a church that cares. We need to be a church that wants to see a healthy church in every city. Right? We're going to be planting churches out of Radiant Life Church, and we're constantly looking at, God, where are you calling us to? What city? Where are we going to go? And there may be a city in which you live in that you're like, man, there needs to be a life-giving church there. Well, I hope one day a Radiant Life Church plant is a life-giving church in that city, because that's what we want to do. We want to spread the gospel. We want to spread the good news. We want to be in church that engages with the community. I love that. Just a few weeks ago, last week on July 4th, we were able to be downtown on the 2nd and celebrate, give away pepperoni rolls and serve our community. And I can't remember, we gave away 600 tattoos. That's the church we go to. We just give away tattoos to all the kids. Here, kid. But don't worry, none around the wrist, well, there was one on the forehead. We won't talk about that. But here's the deal: what do we want to do? We want to engage the community. We want to let the community know that we're not here to build a church. We're here to bless the community. Right? We're not here just to grow our church. A natural byproduct of health is growth. But if our doors close, would the community care? Love Week is that opportunity, right, where we get to serve. We have six projects in 6 different parks within our city that the city service director has said, hey, thanks so much. Which of these can you do? And I'm like, what do you mean, which one? We're doing all 6. Right, we're going to do all 6, and we're going to provide all the funds for that because we want you to know we love you. We exist. We're here for you. It's not the other way around like, oh, what can we get from the city? No, what can we give to the city? Because we love community engagement. We want to be a church that lasts and enjoys life. Right? Have some fun. Lighten up. I'm waiting for somebody else to get it other than Tina. Tina has fun, right? Come on. Hang out with Tina. That's all I'm going to say. Hang out with Tina. You'll have some fun in this life. We want to be a church that's passionate about following after God. We want to be a church that cares too much. We want to be a church that listens to loud music too much. We want to be a church that gives the missions too much. We just want to be a church, that's a life-giving entity in the city, in the county, in the state, in the country, in the globe, that we have an opportunity to be a part of. I don't want to pastor a church that fights and bickers and quarrels and kills each other. I just don't want to be in that church. Some of you are like, well, we don't have that. That's not us, right? We're not that type of church. No, but the text goes on to say, you want things that you don't have. Do we covet things? Do we want what others have? I don't want to be that church. And James is like, hey, listen, in the verse 2, he says, hey, listen, you don't have it because you didn't ask for it. But he says, when you do ask for it, look at your hearts. Your hearts aren't doing it in a humble way. It's in an arrogant way. It's in a proud way. In verse 3, he says, and even when you ask, you don't get it because your motives are wrong. You want only what will give you what? Pleasure. What's he saying? He says, we are in love with the wrong things. So he's saying, you're in love with the wrong things. He's saying what you want will actually harm you, not help you. It's going to be hurtful. And I see that, and I wouldn't want you to experience that. How many know when your kids are young, you know what's best for them? It's not like you take your 2-year-old out and say, hey, whatever you want to do. You want to go play in the road? Go play in the road, kid. It's fine. Where's the best place to play kickball? In the middle of the street. Why not try the highway? No, you know what's best for them. So as a parent, when my kids were young, this was before like all the safety things that you could put on they had a few of those safety things, but we had a different model of making sure our kids were safe. It was called, if you do that, I'll punish you, but it's a whole different model. But there was this moment where we were at a friend's house, because what do? You take all your chemicals when you have kids and you put them up, but we were at a friend's house where they didn't have kids. And so there was a cabinet where underneath a bunch of chemicals were there, and I was like, that's harmful, that's not helpful, right? You can't just go grab the Comet bottle, right? And for the next generation, chewing Tide Pods is a bad idea, okay? Just letting you know. But I was like, this is going to be harmful. This is not helpful. But my 2-year-old, didn't understand that. And so they kept trying to open the door. So what did I do as a parent? I kept putting my foot at the bottom of the door so they couldn't get it open. They kept pulling. I kept closing. Because as a parent, I knew that on the other side of that cabinet was destruction. I knew that the choice they were going to make was going to be harmful and not helpful. That's what our Heavenly Father does to us. He knows on the other side of the choice that there's going to be harm. And he's sitting there with his foot against the cabinet. And what do we keep doing? We keep trying to open the cabinet. We keep trying to pull that thing open and saying, God, I want what's in there. And God's like, no, you don't. Because that choice you're about to make is going to lead to destruction. That choice you're about to make does not lead to my will. But sometimes we just want to rip that thing open because it's not about what God wants. It's not about what God wants for us. It's what we want for us. It's not about God's way, it's about our way. It's not about God's will. God's will, I'm not sure, but my will is going to trump God's will. And so we keep trying to pry that thing open. And God's like, no, listen, it's harmful. So what does God want to do? This is what he's constantly doing for us. Look at James 4:6. It says he gives grace what? Generously. How many are thankful that he gives it generously? That he doesn't portion it out or ration it out? Because some of us, including myself, would be in some dire straits, right? Oh, so-and-so already used so much and I get very little. Not a good idea. So he is giving grace generously. As the scriptures say, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So how do we humble ourselves? Verse 7 says, so humble yourselves before God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. So there's a resistance. We got to resist the enemy. But in the New Century Version, it's, instead of saying, so humble yourselves, it says, give yourselves completely to God. Right, so how do we humble ourselves? We have to be willing to give ourselves completely to God, which means every day we have to depend on God. Completely, not whole, not half, not a quarter, not a third, not a portion, but he wants all of us. Jesus didn't give it all for you so you would give half to him. Do you hear me? He didn't give it all for you so you give half back. He gave his very best. Yet while we were sinners, while we were messed up, while we were jacking it all up, he gave his life for us so we could experience life more to the fullest, more abundantly. So he gave it all, and he's saying, listen, will you give your best back? Will you give your best back? As we continue on in James chapter 4 and verse 8, it says, come close to God, and God will come close to you. That's why we're passionate worshipers here at RLC, right? There's that moment in the service where we say, God, we want to come close to you, and as we come close to you, we know that you're going to come close to us. It says, wash your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts. For your loyalty is divided between God and the world. And then in verse 10, it says, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up in honor. God wants you to go low so he can lift you up high. Right? There's that humility. He wants you to go low so he can lift you up high. It's not that the people on the front row are going to totally get this. The rest of you, don't Google it. But there's this crazy new song out about dropping it low for Jesus, okay? Don't Google it, don't listen to it. Okay, just know what he's talking about. He's saying, listen, I want you in humility to go low. I want you to consider others before yourself. in Philippians 2. I want you to be able to go low. So what? So I then could lift you on high. Why? Then it's about me. It's not about you. It's about him receiving the glory, the fame. It's about his name being known because it's him doing the work. So we go low so he could be lifted high. So God is wanting his will for us, that we would acknowledge that we need help. God's will for your life is also, number 2, if you're taking notes, is believe the best about everyone you meet. So what is God's will for your everyday life? Believe the best about everyone you meet. Now, I know when I say that, some of you are like, that's a bad idea, Pastor Lance. There are some people out there that, yes, you're going to get burned. You will get burned. But I can also tell you this, the reward is worth the risk. The reward is worth the risk. To be able to believe the best, to look at them and not judge their motives, but to love them exactly the way they are. So we believe the best with everyone we meet. Why do we do that? 3 reasons. Number 1 is this. It's not your responsibility to judge others. It's not your responsibility. Do you know when stress happens? Stress happens when you take responsibility for things we have no authority for. That's when stress happens. When you begin to take responsibility for things that you weren't meant to carry, that you have no authority over. This is what it says in the book of James, chapter 4, verses 11 and 12. It says, don't speak evil against each other, dear brothers and sisters. Just let that sink in for a moment. Don't speak evil. Brothers and sisters, that's you and I. Right? So just keep that calm. If you criticize and judge each other, then you are criticizing and judging God's law. But your job is to obey the law, not to judge whether it applies to you. God alone, who gave the law, is the judge. He alone has the power to save or to destroy. So what right do you have to judge your neighbors? Now, I'm not saying right here, right now, or people watching online, maybe someone here in the first service, that this statement would relate to, but I think some of us need to resign our position as general managers of the universe. Right? Stop being the Jesus police, just walking around, just waiting for someone to make a mistake so you can put them in spiritual cuffs and condemn them and judge them for all of their flaws and all of their mistakes. Right? We're general, this is mine, this is my universe, this is my place, this is the right that I have. We're all truth and no grace. Just let this sink in for a moment. Remember I said as parents, you know what's best for your children? Do you know that God is the parent and you're the child? Right? Some of us get that mixed up. Like, no. I'm the parent. God, you're the child. I tell you what to do, you do it. It's wonderful. No, he's the parent. He gets to guide. He gets to direct. He's Abba Father. He's Daddy. He gets to discipline. That's his responsibility. You know what your responsibility is? To love. He does all the rest. He's just asking you what? To love him, to love your neighbors, and to love yourself. Yeah, see? That's what I'm saying, Dina. You're awake. I love it. So here's the second reason to believe the best about everyone you meet. When you judge others, you're wrong most of the time. I said it last week. What? You never know what somebody else is walking through. How many know when you're already angry, you become angrier at what everybody else is doing? Right? How many of you have ever done any type of home improvement project by yourself? How many of you during that home improvement project, even though you said it was going to be easy, don't ever say it's going to be easy. That's a lie from the devil right there. Don't ever say it. You speak over it, your house will catch on fire. I'm telling you, it will. All right? But you say it's going to be easy, and you go to the store and you buy what you need. 5 times later, right, you're on your way back to the home improvement. You're like, this was supposed to be easy. I just needed one fitting, one piece, right? And so you're on your way back for the 5th time. How many know that by the 5th time you're angry? And then all of a sudden, there's this well-meaning individual in front of you who's driving, and they're doing the speed limit. Everything's fine, but then the light turns orange. How many know there's an orange when you're angry? It's between the red and the yellow. And it's in that moment where they do the right thing by stopping, but it's in that moment where you stop and then throw your hands up. What are you doing? You could have made it, and I could have made it. And then you get to the store, and there's no carts. The carts you need to haul the piece or the lumber or whatever you need isn't available, and you're looking all around the store, and you just keep getting angry. And it's fueling. And then you're walking around the store with RSF, resting stank face. You're like, I hate this. But hear me on this. No one has done anything to you yet. But what happens is in that moment when we're angry and we have that face, and we begin judging people. We begin judging people. Right, you walk by where people are looking at tiles, like for their bathroom or their kitchen floor, and you're looking at them, and in your mind, you're like, that's the ugliest tile I've ever seen. I wouldn't put that in my house. That's disgusting. You're blind. Now, you may not say it, but what are you doing? You're judging what they're about to purchase. right? And then you turn the next aisle, and there's a 2-year-old throwing a tantrum, and you're like, I just need to get to the screws, and this 2-year-old, right? And then you're judging the parents like, beat your kids, spank, do something to your kids. And don't say you haven't. That's a lie. Because I guarantee you, there are times when you turned the car to go down the aisle, and you saw that kid, and you went, not today, and you went down the other aisle. You didn't even need anything. And you're like, I'm going down a different aisle because I can't do it. And so you're judging their parenting skills, but you have no clue what that kid or what that parent has even gone through. Right? And then you pay for your stuff and you're still angry, and this is the best one. You're on your way out to your car, you feel like you're calming down, and then somebody has a Toyota Corolla parked out front, and then the next thing happens, they're trying to put a already assembled gas grill into a Toyota Corolla. How many know that never has ended well? Like, unless you plan on strapping that thing to your roof, you ain't getting it in there. Common sense says, this thing's bigger than my car, it ain't fitting. But then you start judging them like, are you an idiot? I'll be honest with you, there's one time I was walking out of Home Depot right here in town, and it was a car, and the trunk was open, and they were trying to put a riding mower in the trunk. I didn't judge them. I did laugh at them, but I promise you I didn't judge them. I laughed because I was like, they have a rental truck for $19. Like, just rent the truck, put the mower and take it home, you're good. Right, but what do? We want to judge, but that's not up to us. Here's the problem when we begin to judge. We want to judge others by their actions and others to judge us by our intentions. Oh, that's what you did, I'll judge you. Oh, don't judge me that way, because my intentions were pure. My intentions were good. I'm a good person. Like, my intentions were not to be late. My intentions were to make sure I showed up on time. My intentions were to help you out. My intentions were not to be mean. My intentions, right? I didn't mean to say that. So we want to judge others by actions, but we want them to judge us by our intentions. Sometimes I love just sharing with you something from the Message Bible. 1 Corinthians 4:5 from the Message. Just hear this. This is how it starts. It says, so don't get ahead of the master and jump to conclusions with your judgments before all the evidence is in. Yeah. I don't know if that spoke to you, it convicted me. I may be the only one, but I was like, oh, right? Don't jump to conclusions until what all the evidence is in. Here's the third reason why we just have to believe the best about everyone you meet, and that is this. When you believe the best, it allows you to see the benefits of reaping and sowing. The law of reaping and sowing. When you plant, you plant some apple seeds, you don't get oranges, you get apples. So whatever it is you're sowing, that's what you're going to reap. So if you're sowing kindness, you're going to reap kindness, right? If you're sowing generosity, you're going to reap generosity. I've never seen the opposite happen. I'm not sure what I would do if it did, but how many know when you walk through, you're going to a department store or any store and they have double doors, like our church, double doors. If someone in front of you walks in, what do they usually do? They grab the door, they hold it open for you, and you walk in. You're the first one to get to the second set of doors, and what do? You open it, and now you let them go by. Why? Because it's reaping and sowing. You have sown kindness, and now you are reaping the benefit of that kindness. If someone ever shuts that second door, I'm going to be like, I don't know what happened. They didn't get the law of reciprocity, of like just what you reap, you sow. In the book of Luke, chapter 6, verse 37 and 38, it says, do not judge others, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn others, or it will all come back against you. Forgive others, and you will be forgiven. Give, and you will receive. Your gift will return to you in full, pressed down, shaken together to make room for more. It's going to run over and be poured into your lap. And then it ends with this. Let the amount you give will determine the amount you get back. That's generosity. That's kindness. That's wisdom. That's love. That's compassion. That's grace. That's mercy. The amount that you pour out, the amount you're going to get back. So if you're like, oh man, listen, I'm pouring out drops, then you're going to get drops back. Well, I'm using a bucket, then you'll get buckets back. I'm using a fire hose, you'll get fire hose back. Because what that tells me is our actions have a boomerang effect. Right? When you throw a boomerang, you throw it out and hopefully it comes back. Now, I happen to know a little thing about boomerangs because I used to throw them when I was a teenager. If you haven't heard that, by the way, I did finish 12th in the nation in the National United States Boomerang Association tournament. Yes, that's good. Oh, by the way, I was on ESPN. So when Pastor Anthony be talking about winning a 6th grade championship, I was on ESPN, darn it. Wasn't one time like I want to get, oh, look at me. I'm just kidding. All right, so I'll be honest with you. I said that first service, and it just came to me. It's not on my notes, and I had to put it in second service because it was just that good, right? And then Alan Tart walks up in after service like, oh, remember that one time in kindergarten? And Anthony's like, it was 6th grade. Oh. But there's this boomerang effect. What you're giving out is going to come back. So if you don't like what you're getting back, maybe you need to check what you're giving. So what do we need to do for the will of God? We need, every day in our lives, we need to acknowledge the fact that we need God. The second thing is to believe the best about everyone. And then lastly, if you're taking notes, is consult with God before you do anything. By a show of hands, ready? We're going to have an honesty check. How many of you have ever made a decision because in the moment it felt right, but in the long term, it was a horrible idea? Yeah, like all in the same boat, like that was a bad idea. Right, I think about people who got, like I love real estate. I love looking at real estate. It's always intrigued me. And you would have thought it was probably, this is the moment, like this is a good moment. And so you get into real estate in 2007. How many know what happened in 2008? Right, not a good idea. How many of you have ever heard the name Ronald Wayne? Anybody ever heard of the name Ronald Wayne? He bought into a company, he was a third partner in a company you may have heard of. It's called Apple. He bought into it. He owned 10% of the stake of the company, $1,500 investment. So him and Steve Jobs, and I think Steve is at Wozniak, something like that. They were 3 partners together. Steve Jobs got him he was a little scared of Steve because Steve had these crazy ideas of these inventions and this tech. And he said, I don't know if this is a wise investment. So about 3 weeks later, he sold his shares, his stake in the company, $2,300. So he netted $800. Now you would think, oh, that's pretty good. You didn't lose any money. So that wasn't a poor investment. If he would have kept that 10%, today, roughly $50 billion, right? That's what his investment. So how many know there's a good time, there's a right time to consult God before you do anything? Timing is everything. James 4:13-15. It says, look here, you who say, today or tomorrow we're going to a certain town and we'll stay there a year. We will do business there and make a profit. How do you know what your life will be like tomorrow? Your life is like a morning fog. It's a vapor, right? The scripture says it's there for a little while and then it's gone. He's talking about us. He's talking about right now. Like in a blink of an eye, it could be gone. It says what you ought to say is, if the Lord wants us to, we will live and do this or that. What's it saying? That our life, our will is to follow God's will, which is if he tells us to do something, we do it. Which would beg the question for us to always ask when we're thinking about consulting God before we do anything. Maybe we should ask this question: will this honor God? What I'm about to say, what I'm about to do, what I'm thinking right now about the pastor, is that honoring God? My finances, is this honoring God? Right, I'm giving 1% and wasting the 99. Is that honoring God? When God looks through our checking account and he sees all the transactions, does he see we're a kingdom builder? Or does he see we're all about ourselves? Remember, it's reaping and sowing. What's he looking at? When it comes to our relationships, how are you talking about your wife and children? Let that sink in for a moment. How do you talk to your spouse? And I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. Trust me. I drop the ball just like you will drop the ball. But when it comes to, are we really, will this honor God? Right, when we're speaking to our spouse, is this going to honor God? We're speaking to our children. Right, because if you start speaking lies and you start speaking destruction and you're yelling and you're screaming, what you're saying is, listen, I know that you are fearfully, wonderfully made. I know that the creator of the universe created you and has formed you and fashioned you and lives inside of you, but I don't like his creation. Oh, that's a game changer there. Well, that's not what I'm telling God. No, that's what you're telling him. Because your spouse, the person sitting on either side of you, whoever that is, if you're not married to him, if it's just a friend, if it's somebody you've never met before, they are the affection of God's eye. They're the apple of his eye. They should be treated accordingly because they are a child of God. And why would we want to treat God's children in a way that wouldn't honor him? And we could keep going all morning long with finances, relationship. Will this honor God? But loving people is not something you pray about. It's something you live out. Right? You don't have to pray about, should I love that person? You don't have to pray about it. You just live it out. Right? How am I honoring that person? Right? How am I loving my neighbor as myself? Like you keep driving by your neighbor's driveway every day because you pass their house, right? Because they live next door to you or 2 doors down. The trash was taken out on Wednesday. It's now Saturday. It's Sunday. Their trash can's still at the end of the road. Surely it's someone's job to grab that trash can and take it to their house, and you judge them and you say, listen, take your trash and get it, and it's ugly. But maybe, will this honor God? Will you stop, by you stopping and taking their trash can back up to their house, would that honor God? You don't have to pray about it. Now, if they got dogs, don't cross the fence. But other than that, you just do it. Find a way that you can love your neighbors as you're loving yourself. So the life-encompassing will of God, here's the three things. I'll repeat them for you. It's for all of us. This is all of us. Everybody in this room. The will of God for my life. Here's the thing. We have to be willing to admit we need help. We can't save ourselves. That's why we need a Savior. We can't do it. The second thing is we have to believe the best about everybody. We want to be in the will of God, believe the best about everybody. And I know there could be some pain wrapped up in that. And I'm not saying allow yourself to be a doormat. Hear me. Like, oh, I believe the best about this person. You told me to keep doing it. Now I'm 50 times into it, and all they do is they're just abusive. That's not. Don't take my words out of context. That's not what I'm saying. But when you say there's a stranger, you don't know their story. Just believe the best. And number three is consult God before you do anything. God, does this honor you? Am I honoring you with my lips, with my life, with my actions, with my deeds, with my faith, with my worship? Is this honoring you? Reminds me of a golfer. He gets to this tee, right? And he's like, man, it's about 120 yards. I got my 9-iron. I mean, I'd use a 56-degree lob wedge from 120 yards, but no, I'm just kidding. But here's the deal. He gets out there, and there's a hole, and you got the green, and it's just surrounded by water. And like any good golfer, in my golf bag right now, which is in my car, I have a bag up top and a bag down below. Both of them have golf balls in it. One are golf balls that I didn't pay for but are really expensive. And then the bag down below, still golf balls I didn't pay for that I found and are junk, like they're from Walmart. And so they're down there. So when you get to that hole, you're like, if I hit a $5 golf ball and lose it, I'm going to be angry. But if I hit a 50-cent golf ball and lose it, who cares? Especially for me, I didn't pay for them anyway. So this golfer gets up and he's looking and he's like, all right, I'm going to use an old ball because I don't want to lose it. So he goes out and he puts an old ball down, right? And he's sitting there and he's getting ready to swing and he's all prepared. And then as soon as he goes back, he hears this loud voice from above. Use a new ball. Okay, Lord. And so all of a sudden he goes in his bag and he gets out the new ball and he puts the new ball down. He's gotten some confidence, right? And he's like, okay, here we go. And sure enough, he's getting ready to take it. He hears that voice again. Take a practice swing. Right? So you have a choice with your obedience to the will of God. You hear this voice, hey, put down a new ball. Great. Oh, now it's all of a sudden take a practice swing. So sure enough, let's take a practice swing. Right? He takes it back. Oh, I wish I had a ball right there. That would have been... That's why they asked if I was going to swing a ball, and I said, no, I don't want to kill anybody. And so now the practice swing is over. He goes ahead and he puts the new ball down, and he gets ready to swing, and all of a sudden the voice again, even louder, says, use the old ball. Why? Because the Father in heaven watched the practice swing. He knows what's helpful and he knows what's harmful. He saw the swing, use the other ball. That's the will of God for our lives. That's the will of God, nothing more, nothing less. It's simple obedience to what God has already asked us to do. That's all he's asking of us, to live in obedience. God, I want to be willing to admit I need your help because I don't have all the answers. You don't. God, I want to be in your will because I want to believe the best about everybody. It's not my job to judge. It's not my responsibility. God, you do really good at your job. Before we walked on stage for our first service, I told all the worship team and media team in the back, I said, listen, here's the deal. I learned early on in ministry, I do a poor job at convicting people. What I mean by that is I could surely come up to you, get to know you, understand your life, and just be able to be like, yeah, you're horrible, right? You're not a good person, you do this. And the Spirit of God, when given the opportunity, will speak into our lives. Will bring conviction, will bring truth, will bring righteousness, will bring life change from the inside out. It's not my job, it's not your job. It's the Spirit's job. The life-encompassing will of God is, I got to consult God before I do anything. So you're here this morning, you're like, okay, well, how are you going to end? This is how we're going to end. It's really simple. It's really easy, actually. Do you want to be in the center of God's will? Now, you may have a specific calling, like our kids. We have youth that came back from camp. They feel called into ministry. They were called to do something else, and God spoke to them. Awesome. We'll empower them. We're going to raise them up because it's not the next generation of leaders. It's the current generation of leaders. There are going to be some kids who are going to come home from camp and you're going to be like, right? But what about you for tomorrow morning? Do you know the most important part of the message that we preach every week is not inside the building? The most important part of the message is when you get into your car and you say, what did I just listen to? What did I just hear? And what am I going to do about it? How do I apply the text? How do I apply the book of James chapter 4? How do I apply the will of God to my life? So here's how we're going to end. I just want you to close your eyes for a moment. You're here this morning, you're watching online. We just want to pray for you. That's all we're going to do. If you were being honest with yourself and you say, Pastor Lance, I want to be in the will of God. I want to love people the way right there in that moment. I want to think the best of them. I want to be able to make sure that I'm asking him for help, and I want to be able to consult him. I want to talk to him about the choices and the decisions I'm making. If that's you, just say, I want to be in the will of God. That life-encompassing will of God. I want to live in obedience to his word. Nothing more, nothing else. With every eye closed, would you just simply raise your hand toward heaven as we pray for you this morning?
God, we thank you that you've made it clear to show us what it looks like to be in the middle of your will for our lives. God, that you've preserved your word for us to show us what we should and shouldn't do, how we should and shouldn't think, how we should and should not approach other people. God, you've given us your word to make it clear how we should view ourselves and what our identity should be wrapped up in. So God, I thank you that you've done the hard work and you're asking us to simply partner with you, to hear your voice, to hear your command, to hear what you would have us do and do it, to follow through on what you've said, to walk on the path that you've laid out for every single one of us. God, I pray that you would give us even more clarity as we get ready to go from this place. Give us the courage that we need to act on it, to make those difficult decisions, to have those tough conversations, to do what we need to do, to think the way we need to think, to become the people you've created us to be. Jesus, we love you. We thank you. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.